I deserve someone more ambitious, she declared confidently. I smiled, resigned from her family business, launched my own venture quietly, and removed my name from shared assets. The market responded faster than she expected, and so did her sudden interest in my vision. I think I deserve someone more ambitious than you, she said it at dinner. Not in a fight. Not after some heated argument that had been building for hours. She said it the way someone reads a weather forecast. Calm, certain, almost bored. Like she had rehearsed it so many times in her head that saying it out loud was just a formality. I set my fork down slowly. I looked at her. Nicole Hargrove, the woman I had spent 3 years building a life alongside. And I did the one thing she clearly did not expect. I smiled. Not a broken smile. Not the kind that's covering up tears. A quiet, settled smile. The kind that only comes when something clicks. When a door you didn't even know was locked suddenly swings open on its own. Okay, I said. Just that. One word. She blinked. She had prepared for an argument, I could tell. She had loaded her artillery, the comparisons, the statistics, the list of things I wasn't, and I had just stepped out of the way entirely. Okay, she repeated, like the word didn't translate. Yeah, I said, and reached for my glass of water. That's all you have to say? What else would you like me to say, Nicole? She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked away toward the restaurant window. Outside, the city moved along without us. Headlights, umbrellas, people who had no idea that something irreversible had just happened at a corner table near the breadbasket. I paid the bill. We drove home in silence. And that night, while she slept, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and started writing down every single thing I needed to undo. Some quick context, because you deserve to understand what that smile actually meant. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I was 31 years old. I had been with Nicole for 3 years, living together for the last 14 months. For 2 of those 3 years, I had been working inside her family's business, Hargrove Logistics, a mid-sized freight and supply chain management company her father, Victor Hargrove, had built over 25 years. I had joined as an operations analyst. I had a background in systems engineering and software development, and Victor had recruited me personally after watching me overhaul a distribution network for a previous employer. He said he wanted fresh thinking inside the company. What he meant, I would eventually understand, was that he wanted someone who would modernize things quietly, without threatening the old guard, without demanding credit, and without asking for equity. I had done exactly that for 2 years. Streamlined 3 departments. Cut operational overhead by roughly 22%. Built an internal tracking dashboard that the company still uses every single day. And through all of it, my official title remained Senior Operations Analyst. No promotion, no bonus structure tied to the improvements I had driven. And every time I brought it up, Victor would nod warmly and say something like, "You're doing incredible work. We're going to take care of you, son." He always called me son. I used to find it touching. Nicole and I had met before I joined the company. That part matters. We were introduced through mutual friends at a rooftop gathering in the summer, and within 4 months we were serious. The job at Hargrove came 8 months into the relationship. Victor had approached me directly. Nicole had been supportive, enthusiastic, even. And at the time I had seen it as a wonderful alignment of things I cared about. The woman I loved, interesting work, and a company with real potential. What I hadn't accounted for was the invisible architecture of that arrangement. The assumptions people quietly build when someone enters a family business through the romantic door. That you are loyal first, grateful second, ambitious never, because ambition inside someone else's kingdom reads as threat. I understood all of this intellectually. But understanding something and living inside it are 2 very different experiences. The first year inside Hargrove had been genuinely energizing. There was real work to be done, and I had the skills to do it. Victor trusted me quickly, faster than I expected, and the early wins were satisfying in the particular way that work is satisfying when you're given a genuine problem and the right tools to untangle it. I had rebuilt the routing logic for their southern distribution corridor in my first 4 months. It had saved them 11% in fuel costs by quarter's end. Victor had taken me to lunch to celebrate. He had ordered the expensive bottle and told me I was exactly the kind of mind this company needed. But even then, in the warmth of that early approval, something about the framing had sat slightly wrong. He hadn't said you're exactly the kind of person we want to grow with. He hadn't said we want to build something alongside you. He had said, this company needs you, as if I were a resource. as if my value lived entirely in what I produced for the entity, rather than what the entity might ever produce for me. I filed it away and told myself I was being too analytical. But I had never once been wrong about those early impressions. Not once in my life. By the second year, the pattern had become unmistakable. I would identify a problem, build a solution, hand it across, watch it get implemented and praised, and then the next quarter would arrive and we would begin the cycle again. No conversation about trajectory. No discussion about equity. No acknowledgement that the department structures I had quietly redesigned were saving the company money every single month. I had raised the subject with Nicole once, carefully, late on a Tuesday evening. She had tilted her head and said, "Dad takes care of the people who take care of the company." Takes care of them how? I had asked. Job security, she had said. Like that was the whole answer. Like stability was the same thing as being valued. I had not pushed further that night, but I had opened my laptop after she fell asleep and started a blank document. At the top, I had written 3 words, the real problem. Beneath them, over the next hour, I had outlined every gap I saw in the logistics software landscape for mid-market operators. Every inefficiency I had personally watched bleed money at companies like Hargrove. Every solution I had already imagined but never had the structural space to build. I hadn't known, that Tuesday night, that I was writing the founding document of Pathright. I had thought I was just venting into a blank page. But the seed had been planted in the quiet distance between what Nicole had said and what I had needed to hear. The morning after the restaurant, I woke up before the alarm. Nicole was still asleep, one arm stretched across the empty space where I usually lay. I showered, made coffee, and sat at the same kitchen table from the night before. The notebook was still there. I looked at the list I had written. It wasn't a rage list. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, practical, and organized the way I organize everything, in order of urgency, with notes beside each item. The first entry read, resignation, draft today. The second, shared lease, review terms, begin transition. The third, joint account, transfer my contributions, close access. The fourth, and the one I had underlined twice, the project, it's time. That last one needed some explanation, even just to myself. For almost 18 months, I had been developing something on the side, quietly, on weekends, on evenings, in the hour before Nicole woke up and the hour after she went to sleep. A route optimization and predictive logistics software platform, built specifically for mid-market freight companies that couldn't afford enterprise-level tools but were hemorrhaging efficiency because of outdated systems. I knew the problem intimately. I had been living inside it for 2 years. I had mapped every gap, every friction point, every place where a smarter system would save hours and money. The prototype was functioning. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And I had quietly spoken to 3 potential early clients, 2 regional freight operators and a cold chain distribution company, none of whom knew I was currently employed by a competitor. The platform needed a name, a proper code base, a pitch deck, and capital. And until the night before, I had been too comfortable or too afraid to pull the trigger. Nicole had done me a favor. She just didn't know it yet. I submitted my resignation to Victor Hargrove on a Tuesday morning. I sent it by email and followed up with a printed copy delivered to his assistant before he arrived at the office. Professional. Clean. No drama. The email was 6 sentences. I thanked him for the opportunity, stated my last working day as 2 weeks from that date, indicated my willingness to assist with any transition documentation, and wished the company continued success. Nothing about Nicole. Nothing about the dinner. Nothing about the 2 years of equity-free contribution. Just 6 clean sentences. His response arrived 40 minutes later. "Come see me before your first meeting." I went. Victor was behind his desk, the one that always reminded me of a ship's captain wheel. Oversized, dramatic, built to project authority. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. "This is because of Nicole," he said immediately. "No," I said. "It's not." He studied me the way a man studies something he thought he owned, but is now watching walk toward the door. "You're one of the best people we have," he said. "I appreciate that, Victor." "Then what is this about?" "It's about the right time," I said. "I've been working towards something else for a while. The timing lines up." "What's something else?" "A platform. Logistics software. For companies your size and smaller." He was quiet for a moment. I watched the shift happen behind his eyes, from disappointed to calculating. "That's a conflict of interest," he said carefully. "I'll honor the standard non-compete window," I said. "Everything I've built for Hargrove belongs to Hargrove. I'm not taking any proprietary data, any client contacts, or any internal architecture. My platform is built on independent research. Another long silence. Does Nicole know? He asked. We'll talk, I said. He nodded once, slowly, the way men do when they've realized the conversation has already ended and they're just catching up. I'll process the resignation, he said. I thanked him, shook his hand, and walked out of his office for what I knew would be the last time. Nicole did not take it well. That evening, she came home from her own role at the company. She managed client relations, the kind of role that would have gone to an outside hire if her last name were different. And I was at the table with my laptop open, a cup of cold coffee beside me, deep inside a code revision. She stood in the doorway for a moment, reading the scene. Dad called me, she said. I figured he would. You resigned. I did. She dropped her bag on the counter and folded her arms. Why didn't you tell me first? I looked up from the screen. You told me 2 nights ago that I wasn't ambitious enough, I said. I took it seriously. She shook her head. That's not. I didn't mean you should quit your job. What did you mean then? She looked at the ceiling, then back at me. I meant that you're comfortable, that you don't push for things, that you could be more, I don't know, driven. And now I am, I said. Problem solved. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. She stared at me for a long moment. I noticed something then, something I hadn't been able to see clearly before that dinner, before the smile, before the notebook. She wasn't upset because I had quit. She was upset because she hadn't predicted it. Nicole operated in a world she had largely scripted. Her family's money smoothed most edges. Her father's name opened most doors. And I, the stable, patient, quietly capable man she'd brought home, had always been a known variable in that world. I had never surprised her. Until now. What are you even building? She asked. I turned the laptop to face her. She looked at it for about 4 seconds. It's a logistics software platform, I said. Route optimization, predictive freight modeling, real-time carrier performance analytics. For mid-market operators. She looked at it the way someone looks at a tax form, aware that it's important but unwilling to engage with the details. Is it funded? She asked. Not yet. Working on it. So you quit a stable job, she said, to work on an unfunded software project. Yes. That's your ambition? Something in my chest settled very, very quiet. Yes, I said again. That's my ambition. She picked her bag back up and walked toward the bedroom. I hope it works out, she said, and I genuinely could not tell if she meant it. I want to be honest about the next few weeks, because they weren't cinematic. They were hard. The kind of hard that doesn't make for a good story in the moment. No montage, no swelling music, just a lot of cold coffee and late nights, and the persistent low-frequency anxiety that lives in the chest of anyone who has ever bet on themselves without a safety net. There were evenings in that first stretch when I would sit in front of my screen and hear the radiator knock and genuinely wonder if I had miscalculated the whole thing. Not because I doubted the product. I never doubted the product. But because I was aware, in a way I hadn't been while safely employed, of exactly how thin the margin was between building something that matters and simply disappearing quietly into a version of yourself that almost tried. I had seen it happen to people. Smart people. Capable people with genuinely good ideas who had simply run out of time, or money, or the particular kind of nerve that surviving uncertainty requires. I would not let that be me. But surviving uncertainty requires you to look at it directly. Not to pretend it isn't there. Not to dress it up in confidence you don't quite feel yet. So I looked at it. Every morning for the first 3 weeks, I would sit with the numbers. My runway. My client pipeline. My build timeline. And I would ask myself one honest question. Is this still the right direction? Every morning the answer came back the same. Yes. Not loud. Not electric. Just a steady, grounded yes. And I would start the day. I moved out of the shared apartment 20 days after my last day at Hargrove. The lease was in both our names, and after a quiet, legal conversation with the building management, I transferred my portion of the deposit, removed my name from the agreement, and moved into a 1-bedroom near the warehouse district that cost me significantly less per month. It wasn't glamorous. The radiator made a sound at 2 a.m. that I eventually learned to sleep through. The corner store on the block had 4 types of hot sauce and no fresh vegetables. But it was mine. Every square foot of it. I also closed my access to the joint savings account Nicole and I had maintained. It was a small account, originally intended for future plans that had never quite been defined, and I transferred out exactly what I had deposited over its lifetime. Not $1 more. I sent her a message when I did it. transferred my contributions out of the joint account. Exact figure in the note. All remaining balance is yours. She read it and didn't respond for 6 hours. Then, fine. One word. Fair enough. I had exactly enough runway, my own savings, carefully protected over 2 years, for about 11 months of lean operations. 11 months to get the platform to a fundable state. 11 months to sign enough paying clients that the math made sense. I reached out to my old friend Owen, who had worked in product development for a decade before going freelance. I told him what I was building. I told him I could offer him a small equity stake and a deferred salary starting at month 4, if things held together. He was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said, "You've been sitting on this for 18 months? More or less. Why didn't you launch sooner?" I didn't answer that honestly. I said something about timing and readiness. What I meant was that I had been waiting for permission that was never going to come. Owen said yes. That mattered more than I showed him. 6 weeks after I left Hargrove, I signed my first paying client. Dermot and Sons Freight, a family-run operation out of the Midwest, second generation, 12 trucks, badly optimized routing that was costing them roughly 8 hours of driver time per week across the fleet. The monthly contract was modest, but it was real. I remember sitting in my apartment after the signed agreement came through email. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I made a sandwich, sat by the window, and looked at the radiator. Then I opened the notebook from the kitchen table and crossed off the 4th item on the list. The project, it's time. Below it, I wrote, "It is time. It has begun." Owen called me that evening. "First client," he said, and I could hear him grinning. "First client," I confirmed. "What are we calling it?" I had been thinking about this. The platform needed a name. Something that communicated clarity and precision without being cold. "Pathright," I said. "Like a craftsman of paths." "A beat. That's actually really good," he said. Pathright was born on a Tuesday evening between a bad radiator and a very average sandwich. Nicole, meanwhile, had apparently moved on. I learned this not from her directly. We had maintained a polite, minimal text-based contact since the apartment separation, but from her brother Colin, who I had always gotten along with well. Colin was 4 years younger than Nicole, honest to a fault, and constitutionally incapable of keeping information to himself. He called me about 8 weeks after I left. "Hey," he said. "This is weird, but you doing okay?" "I'm good, Colin. Building something. Staying busy." "Good. That's good." A pause. "Nicole's seeing someone." I appreciated that he said it directly. "Yeah," I said. "Guy named Dominic Kerr. He's in venture capital. Spends a lot of time talking about his portfolio." "Does she seem happy?" Colin considered this for a moment. "She seems impressed," he said carefully. "Which isn't the same thing." I almost smiled. "Thanks for the heads up," I said. "Dad asks about you sometimes," Colin added. "I don't know if that means anything." "It might mean something," I said. "Not sure what yet." After we hung up, I sat with that information for about 30 seconds. Then I went back to work. Here is the part one don't tell often, because it makes me sound either too composed or not composed enough, depending on who's listening. People, when they hear stories like this one, tend to expect a clean villain. They want the character who dealt the blow to be entirely unsympathetic, selfish in an uncomplicated way, driven by cruelty or greed or something conveniently easy to dislike. Nicole wasn't that. She was sharp and occasionally warm and fiercely loyal to the people inside her small circle. She had shown up for me in ways that mattered during a difficult stretch in my second year at Hargrove, when a project I'd poured myself into had been shelved for political reasons, and I had been quietly furious about it for 2 weeks. She had not tried to fix it. She had not made excuses for her father. She had simply sat with me in the kitchen on a Friday night, ordered the kind of food I liked when I was frustrated, and said, "You're allowed to be angry about it." That had been the right thing to say. I had loved her for saying it. But people are rarely one thing. And the Nicole who had been right on that Friday night was the same Nicole who had been wrong at the restaurant. Both of those things could be true simultaneously. Usually, when relationships end, they end because of the accumulated weight of both things being true at once. The good and the bad stacked in the same person, and eventually the architecture of it stops holding. I did not lie in bed missing Nicole. I want to be clear about that, not to seem cold, but to explain what had actually happened between us, which is something I hadn't been fully honest about even with myself until I was living alone in that radiator apartment. The relationship had been quietly dying for more than a year. Not with visible drama, not with screaming or accusations or any of the clear signal flares that relationships send when they're going down. It had been dying in the way that comfortable things die, slowly, softly, under the weight of assumptions. She had assumed I was content. I had assumed she was patient. Neither of us had been right. The dinner, and the more ambitious declaration, that wasn't the cause of death. That was the obituary. And here's the thing about obituaries. They don't make you sad about the future. They make you clear about what's already gone. So no, I didn't miss her in the aching, sleepless way. I missed the version of us that had existed in the first year. Weekend drives, inside jokes, the easy warmth of two people who are still genuinely curious about each other. That version had stopped existing a long time before the restaurant. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. She had said hers first. Month 3 of Pathright. 3 paying clients. Owen had brought in the second. A refrigerated transport company in the Northeast called Ashford Cold Chain, run by a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria Ashford who had been skeptical on the first call and assigned contract by the third. I had brought in the third myself, a conversation that had started 9 months earlier, before I'd even quit Hargrove, with a regional distributor named Fielding Transport, whose operations director had been interested in principal for so long I'd half assumed he'd say no forever. He said yes at 11:47 on a Thursday morning. I remember because I was eating cereal at my desk when the email arrived, and I spilled the bowl across my keyboard. Owen said that was a good omen. I said it was just a bad desk setup. We were both right. The platform was live for all 3 clients. It was not perfect. There were bugs, workarounds, a couple of late-night fix sessions that stretched until 3 a.m., but it was working. And what it was doing for those 3 clients was undeniable. Dermot and Sons had recovered 9 hours of driver time per week by week 6. Ashford Cold Chain had reduced their missed delivery window rate from 11% to just under 3% in the first month alone. Fielding Transport hadn't reported their numbers yet, but their operations director had sent me an email that said simply, "My dispatchers are actually sleeping on weeknights now." That email, I printed out and taped to the wall above my desk. Month 4. Owen's deferred salary converted to active. We hired a part-time developer, a freelancer named Priya who worked nights and had an uncanny ability to debug faster asleep than most people do awake. She joined a video call on her first day wearing a headset that looked like it had survived a decade of heavy use, with a whiteboard visible behind her covered in code notes so dense they looked like art. She had reviewed our entire code base before the call, had already identified 4 inefficiencies, and had written notes on each. "I have some thoughts," she had said by way of introduction. "Go ahead," I had said. She had gone ahead. For 22 minutes. She was right about every single item. Owen and I had looked at each other after the call ended. "She starts Monday," I had said. She started the moment she read our code base, Owen had said. He was right. We also had a conversation I'd been preparing for. Investment. I had spent 3 weeks building a pitch deck. Not the kind with stock photo backgrounds and vague disruption language. The kind with actual numbers, actual case studies, and a TAM analysis built from freight industry data I'd been collecting for 18 months. I reached out to 6 investors, small funds, mostly regional venture firms that focused on B2B software and logistics infrastructure. 4 took the first call. 2 asked for a follow-up. 1 made an offer. His name was Walter Brin, a quiet, methodical man who ran a small fund out of a converted warehouse office and had a reputation for backing operational software companies before they were obvious. His offer wasn't enormous, but it was enough. More importantly, it came with something I hadn't expected. Walter said, "I want to know what else you've mapped in this space." We talked for 2 hours that day. He invested the following week. I called Owen afterward. "We're funded," I said. He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, you know what this means." "Yeah," I said. "Priya's going full-time," he said. "Yeah. And you need to stop using a folding table as a desk." "I'll get to it," I said. I got to it the next day. It was Colin who first told me that Nicole was aware. Not that she was interested. Not yet. Just that she was aware. He called on a random Wednesday evening around month 5. She saw a mention of Pathright in a trade publication, he said. I had been featured in a regional logistics industry newsletter, small circulation, but well-read within the sector. The piece was a 2-paragraph blurb about early-stage logistics software startups gaining traction among mid-market operators. My name wasn't in it. The platform name was. "What did she say?" I asked. "She Googled it," Collins said. "I was there when she did." She didn't say anything out loud, but she recognized the approach. She worked in client relations at Dad's company long enough to know what the problem is that you're solving. "And Victor," A pause. Dad's been quieter about it, Collins said. What does that mean? It means he knows, Collins said simply. Dad has connections in the industry. He would have heard before the newsletter. I thought about that for a moment. Interesting, I said. Is it? Collins said. Or is it exactly what you expected? I didn't answer that. Month 6 brought the first real test. Not a crisis. Exactly. More of a pressure point. One of our early integration partners quietly mentioned to a larger competitor that Pathright was gaining traction, and that competitor reached out to one of my clients, Fielding Transport, with a generous offer to migrate them to their existing platform at a discounted rate. It was a standard competitive move. Not malicious, but real. I found out when Fielding's operations director, a candid man named Bruce who never wasted words, called me directly. Someone's making a run at us, he said. Thought you should know before I have to make a choice. I appreciate that, Bruce, I said. Can I have a week? You've got 5 days, he said. I'm old-fashioned like that. I spent those 5 days building something I'd been planning but hadn't fully deployed yet. A predictive maintenance module that integrated with Fielding's fleet management data and flagged potential mechanical issues before they became breakdowns. It was ambitious. It required 3 nights of essentially no sleep. Owen handling the client-facing documentation while Priya and I burned through the technical build. On the 4th day, I called Bruce. Check your dashboard, I said. He was quiet for about 90 seconds. Then, how long has this been ready? It's been possible, I said. We just built it for you. Another silence. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I exhaled slowly. Good, I said. You're going to need to stop under-promising, Bruce added, almost as an afterthought. Fair point, I said. Near the end of month 6, I got an email I hadn't expected. It was from Victor Hargrove. Short, professionally worded. The kind of email that has clearly been drafted and redrafted. It said, I've been hearing some strong things about what you're building. If you're ever open to a conversation, not about anything in particular, just a conversation, I'd welcome it. No agenda. No agenda from a man like Victor Hargrove was the most agenda-laden phrase I'd ever read. But I replied, I'm open to it. Let me know when works for you. We met at a restaurant, not the one from the infamous dinner, but a quieter place across town, the kind of place where conversations don't carry. Victor looked the same as always. Composed, well-dressed, with that particular brand of confident restraint that old money tends to produce. We ordered coffee. For the first few minutes we talked about things that didn't matter. The industry, the weather, a mutual acquaintance we both knew from a conference 3 years prior. Then he put his cup down and looked at me directly. I should have promoted you, he said. I hadn't expected it to be that direct. Why didn't you? I asked. He considered his answer carefully. Because you came in through the family door, he said. And I made a mistake that a lot of family business operators make. I assumed your loyalty was structural, that you'd stay regardless. You assumed I had nowhere else to go, I said. Not exactly, he said. I assumed you wouldn't want to go. There's a difference. There is, I agreed. Either way, he said. It was a miscalculation. I respected him for saying it plainly. What did you want to talk about? I asked. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and leaned forward slightly. Hargrove Logistics is going to need to modernize within the next 18 months, he said, or lose ground to operators who are already running smarter systems. I have good people, but I don't have a platform that works the way yours apparently does. You want a license path, right? I said. I want to explore it, he said. On proper commercial terms. Nothing informal. Nothing personal. Nothing personal, I agreed. He nodded. I'll have our commercial team reach out through your official channels, he said. That works, I said. We finished the coffee. He paid the check. I let him. Outside. He paused on the sidewalk and looked at me with an expression that was hard to categorize. She doesn't know I reached out, he said. I understood who he meant. I know, I said. He started, then stopped himself. She's going through her own process. That's okay, I said. She doesn't owe me anything, Victor. And I don't owe her anything either. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite sadness. More like recognition. No, he said quietly. I suppose you don't. We shook hands and went our separate ways. I didn't tell Owen about the Victor meeting. Not because I was hiding it. I told him a week later, when the formal commercial inquiry from Hargrove Logistics arrived in our business inbox. His reaction was exactly what I expected. Your ex's father wants to license the thing you built after your ex told you that you weren't ambitious enough, he said slowly. Correct. That's a short story arc. We're not signing anything yet, I said. Evaluating the terms first. Of course, he said. But still. He paused. How do you feel about it? Good, I said. Commercially good. Personally neutral. Neutral, he repeated. Neutral, I confirmed. He looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who believes you but finds the answer a little too clean. Okay, he said, and we moved on. Nicole called on a Sunday morning. Month 7. I was in the middle of reviewing onboarding documentation when the phone buzzed. Her name on the screen was still saved the same way, just Nicole, no last name, no emoji from when we were together, just the plain word. I looked at it for 2 rings, then answered. Hey, she said. Hey, I said. A brief silence that wasn't quite awkward, more like both of us calibrating. I wanted to call, she said. Not for anything specific. I heard things are going well. They are, I said. Pathright, she said, and I could hear her weighing the word carefully. Pathright, I confirmed. It's a good name, she said. Thanks. Another pause. I wanted to say something, she said. I waited. What I said at dinner. The ambitious thing, I said it badly. You said it the way you meant it, I said. Not aggressively. Just accurately. Maybe, she said. But I meant it badly. What did you mean then? She was quiet for a moment. I think I meant that I was restless, she said. And I didn't know how to say that without putting it on you. So I framed it as a you problem when it was actually a me problem. I sat with that. I appreciate you saying it, I said. Does it change anything? She asked. The question hung there for a moment. Honest. Slightly raw. No, I said gently. But I mean that in a good way. Not a hard way. What does that mean? It means I'm in a different place now, I said. And I think you know that even before I say it. She exhaled quietly. Yeah, she said. I don't hold the dinner against you, I said. I genuinely don't. But I also don't think we were working, Nicole, not just because of that night. I think we both knew. I knew, she said softly. Yeah, I said. Another silence. This one felt clean. Dominic and I aren't, she started. You don't have to explain that, I said. I know, she said. I just wanted to say it. Okay, I said. He was impressive from a distance, she said. Less so from up close. That's usually how it goes, I said. She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Were you building Pathright the whole time we were together? I thought about how to answer that honestly. The concept, I said, and the research, the serious building started after the dinner. So I was the catalyst, she said. In a way, I said. That's either very flattering or very depressing, she said. Somewhere in the middle, I said. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm glad it's working, she said, and this time I could tell she genuinely meant it. Thank you, Nicole. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I said. And that was the conversation. Clean. Honest. No residue. I set the phone down and looked at the window for a while. Then I went back to the onboarding documentation. Month 8. We signed a licensing agreement with Hardgrove Logistics. It was a proper commercial deal, vetted by both legal teams, structured on standard SaaS licensing terms with an implementation support package built in. Victor's commercial director handled the negotiations. Victor himself was not in any of those calls. Neither was Nicole. By the time the contract was executed, Pathright had 7 active clients. The press around us was starting to build, not mainstream, but within the logistics and supply chain press, which in some ways mattered more. Walter Bryn, our investor, had a phrase he used when he called to check in. The moat is forming. By which he meant we were getting to the point where our data, the aggregated, anonymized performance data from our growing client base, was itself becoming an asset that would be harder and harder for a new competitor to replicate. Every new client made the platform smarter. Every new client made the next client's outcomes better. The moat is forming, I told Owen one afternoon. He looked up from his screen. How deep, he asked. Getting there, I said. Good, he said, and went back to work. That was how we celebrated in those days. Efficient and grounded. No champagne. Just the work and the next item on the list. Month 9 brought something I hadn't anticipated, not from the business, but from myself. I was in the office, a real office now, a small lease space with 3 desks and a whiteboard wall I had covered in diagrams, when I looked up from my screen and realized something quiet and significant. The office itself was nothing impressive to look at. 3 mismatched desks we had sourced from 2 different secondhand furniture places. A coffee maker that Owen had contributed from his apartment and refused to replace even after the carafe cracked and had to be held together by a rubber band. A single window that looked out onto the side wall of the building across the alley. But it was ours. And it felt, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in month 9, like the most important square footage I had ever occupied. There was a moment, sometime around 10 a.m. that Tuesday, when Owen was on a client call in the corner and Priya was working remotely, her status light green on our internal board, and I was reviewing an updated version of the predictive freight module that she had improved overnight without being asked. The room was quiet except for Owen's low, confident voice on the phone. The coffee maker was doing something alarming behind me that it did at least 3 times per day, and I looked up from my screen. I was happy, not in a loud, declarative way, not in the social media sense, where you perform contentment for an audience. Just actually, functionally, privately happy. I was doing the right work, with the right person beside me. Owen had become not just a colleague, but the kind of working partner who could tell when something was wrong with my thinking before I could. The company was real. The clients were real. The impact, the 9 recovered driver hours, the 3 a.m. dispatcher who was now sleeping, was real. And I had built it, not with someone else's infrastructure, or someone else's family name, or someone else's patient approval. Mine. From a notebook at a kitchen table, from a radiator apartment and a folding desk, from a smile at a restaurant that Nicole had not understood until much later. I thought about that smile. That single, quiet smile. It had looked like resignation to her. And in a way, it had been. But it hadn't been the surrender kind. It had been the completion kind. The kind that happens when you finally understand that nothing is missing. It's just time to stop waiting for permission to build what you already know how to build. By the end of month 10, we were in early conversations about a Series A. Walter was involved, and so were 2 new potential co-investors he'd introduced from his network, a Chicago-based fund that focused exclusively on logistics and supply chain infrastructure, and a Boston firm that had backed 2 other operational software companies with successful exits. The due diligence process was thorough in a way I had expected, but still felt the pressure of. They wanted 3 years of financial projections. They wanted client references, real conversations with the operators using the platform, not curated testimonials. They wanted a competitive analysis showing why Pathright was defensible against larger players who might eventually try to absorb the problem we were solving into their own ecosystems. Bruce at Fielding was one of the reference calls. He told the investor, apparently, that if Pathright disappeared he would be genuinely irritated, which was, from Bruce, approximately the equivalent of a standing ovation. Gloria Ashford at the cold chain company was more effusive. She told them the platform had changed how she slept at night. Victor's team at Hargrove submitted a written reference that was careful and professional and, in its restraint, somehow said more than anything flowery could have. The number being discussed was not small. I will not say the exact figure, not because it's private in a precious way, but because numbers and stories like this have a tendency to overshadow the actual point. The actual point was this: the market had responded. Not to a pitch, not to a story, to the work. To 11 months of doing exactly what I said I would do, for clients who needed exactly what I had built, at a price point that made their decision obvious. Owen and I had a dinner to mark the occasion, a real dinner, at an actual restaurant, with cloth napkins. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said, somewhere between the main course and the end of the bottle. "What?" "That she called you unambitious," he said. "And you didn't argue. You didn't defend yourself. You just smiled." "I knew something she didn't," I said. "What did you know?" "I thought about it. I knew that ambition doesn't make noise," I said. "It just builds. And eventually the building speaks." Owen looked at me for a moment. "That should be on the wall," he said. "It's already in the notebook," I said. He laughed. A real, full laugh. The kind that means the night is going well and the work has been worth it. I want to tell you the honest version of the ending, because the dishonest version would be easier. The dishonest version would be, she came back, tried to reconcile, and I turned her away with a cool, victorious composure that felt satisfying to everyone who had rooted for me. The honest version is quieter and less dramatic, and I think it's more real. Nicole did reach out one more time. Not to rekindle anything. She sent a message in month 11, a few weeks before the Series A term sheets were finalized. It said, "I know you're going to close a big round. The industry's talking about you. I'm genuinely proud of what you've built. I wanted to say that without any agenda, just because it's true, and you deserve to hear it from me." I read it twice. Then I typed back, "Thank you. That means something. I hope things are going well for you." Because they were honest words. And she was an honest person. She had always been honest, even in her harshest moments. She had never pretended, with me or for me. She had just been wrong about what she saw, and wrong about what she needed. and wrong about what I was capable of, not out of cruelty, but out of the particular blindness that settles in when you've watched someone hold themselves back for long enough that you mistake the restraint for the person. I hadn't been unambitious. I had been waiting. There's a difference. The Hargrove Logistics account became one of our most productive in the first full year. Not because of sentiment, because Victor's team was serious and thorough, and the scale of their operation gave our predictive modeling engine more data to work with than any of our other clients. Victor and I spoke occasionally, in a professional capacity. Always clean, always direct. One afternoon, about a year after that coffee meeting across town, he called to discuss a potential expansion of the licensing scope. At the end of the call, he paused. "You know," he said, "when you walked out of my office with that resignation, I thought you were making a mistake." "I know," I said. "I was wrong," he said. "You weren't the only one who thought so," I said. A brief, weighted silence. "No," he said. "I suppose not." "It worked out, Victor," I said. "It did," he said. "For you. And for you too," I said. "Commercially speaking." He almost laughed. "Not quite, but almost." "Commercially speaking," he agreed. "Here's what I know now, that I didn't fully know at the kitchen table with the notebook." The smile wasn't about her. It wasn't about proving something. It wasn't about revenge or any of the cleaner emotions that make for better stories. The smile was about recognition. In the half-second between her words and my response, something had clicked into place, something I had been moving toward for 18 months without fully naming it. That I was not, in fact, waiting for the right moment. I was waiting for permission. Her declaration at dinner, cold and casual and aimed to deflate, had done the opposite. It had revoked the permission I had been subconsciously waiting for her to grant. And the instant it was revoked, I realized I had never needed it. Not from her. Not from Victor. Not from the comfortable, stable, predictable arrangement I had built my days around. The work had always been there. The capability had always been there. The only thing standing between me and Pathright was the assumption that I needed someone else to see the value in it first. She looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't enough. And what I heard, underneath the words, in the quiet place behind the chest, was something completely different. I heard, "You've been enough all along. You just forgot to act like it." So I smiled, and then I went to work. Pathright closed its Series A 11 months and 3 weeks after I submitted that 6-sentence resignation letter. We had 9 clients on active contracts, a 10th in the onboarding pipeline, a team of 4 full-time and 2 part-time, a platform that, per an independent operations audit requested by one of our Series A investors, was delivering measurable, documented efficiency gains across every single account. On the morning the wire transferred, I was sitting in the office early, before Owen arrived, before Priya logged on from 3 time zones away. Just me, a cup of coffee, and the whiteboard wall covered in the architecture of something I had built from a folding table in a radiator apartment. I pulled out the notebook, the same one from the kitchen table. It was battered now, the cover bent at the corner, the spine soft from months of being shoved into bags and taken to coffee shops and client meetings. I opened it to the first page. 4 items, all crossed off. I read them one more time, slowly. Resignation, draft today. Shared lease, review terms, begin transition. Joint account, transfer my contributions, close access. The project, it's time. Below that last one, in handwriting that looked slightly unsteady from being written at 1 a.m., it is time. It has begun. I closed the notebook, finished the coffee, set a clean page open on my desk, and wrote the first item on the next list.